You're listening to Behind the Hype, where we delve into the stories of artists who are making waves in the digital world, shining a light on their unique journey and creative process, as we discuss key moments that propelled them into the spotlight. I'm Shay Connolly.
And I'm Mark Conway. Let's get into it. Today, ALYSS. ALYSS first came on our radar late last year, lighting up our Twitter spaces with her tracks that left everyone speechless. Then she won everyone over with her laid-back vibe and British charm. She's a maverick musician, producer, and awesome visual artist. She weaves it all together with tribal beats, electronic vibes, and ethereal soul into a sound that's all her own. It's led her to collaborations with big names like Abbey Road Studios and the London Contemporary Orchestra. Her song Pyramid blew up on the Spotify viral charts and TikTok last year, racking up over 20 million streams. She's super cool. We're excited to have her on the show. Thanks to our sponsors at Massive, we kicked off by asking ALYSS, who are you a massive fan of?
In terms of experimentation and just the sonic palette, I would say Subtract, that is a UK producer, really inspired me and kind of got me thinking about production in a different way. / James Blake, like early James Blake. I would say those two are the inspos. So that's not one, that's two.
ALYSS joins us from her home in the UK. You mentioned your two fronts with electronic and piano, or your few fronts, and obviously you're a visual artist as well. I'm curious how much your visual art plays into your music and vice versa.
Well, I would say visual art came before music. I mean, when I was a little girl, I was always drawing fairies and like sassy alien women for some reason. And then music came and I kind of put drawing and things to the side. But then after a while of producing, it was just after I started producing, that's when I started creating the sort of sacred geometry, the black and gold. So that sort of just came out of nowhere. The idea for that, I was just doodling, bored in a telemarketing job, just doing surveys, and I was so bored. So I started drawing all these strange geometrical shapes that I'd never drawn before. And someone was like, "Oh, these look like a mushroom trip I had, or this looks like my LSD, like, you know, the visions I had there." And so I would be doodling while writing lyrics at the same time. So there wasn't like a direct link, I guess, between how they influenced each other. But it felt like when I started doing more of these drawings and transferring them onto the black and gold kind of artwork, I would be listening to a lot of esoteric kind of videos and like alien channelers and this kind of out there stuff while I was drawing. And then what I was listening to in there, what these people were saying, would then transfer in how I was writing lyrics, and I would be, bringing those concepts into songs. And there was a lot of kind of, I would say the healing came, not so much from drawing, but just from listening to these songs while listening to these videos while drawing, and then, putting those into lyrics. And that really, I guess, transformed how I was writing. There was kind of a more philosophical, kind of broader element to the lyrics and tapping into more kind of, I guess, out there subjects, but bringing it into, the electronic field. So that's a very non-linear way of saying how they influence each other. But yeah.
Yeah, I get that, because your videos are so visually striking and prominent. Does that come after you write the song, or does that all sort of work intertwined and is planned from the start?
Yeah, it's definitely an intertwined process. Like I, throughout the day or sometimes I'll just have these like bursts of like a vision of something. And so I have my little kind of notes that I'll write down ideas, and then a song will come and it will be like, these two concepts fit perfectly. Or while I'm making the music, a vision will just come in my head for the video. So there's definitely kind of an exchange, an interplay of, I've got an idea here and then an idea here, and then they just kind of come together. But a lot of the ideas, I guess, visually as well, come from meditations. Like I really pay attention to my dreams and meditation as a means to kind of really incorporate that into my creativity, because I feel like that realm is so unique to us. It's kind of like our dreams and visions are a bit like a fingerprint for our own life. So I like to draw inspiration from those places before anything else for visuals, and I guess lyrics and things like that. So
that's interesting. That's almost like a synesthesia of writing visually.
Yeah, I guess you could say that. Because it is definitely visual. I see very clearly like the story that's happening while I'm writing. So I'd love to have actual synesthesia. How do you say it? Synesthesia.
You
Where
want
you
to taste
see
some
colours.
colours.
Yeah, yeah.
And I know you were classically trained in piano and violin.
Yeah, I was classically trained by my dad on the violin because he's a violinist for the opera house and a composer. So he's obviously got that very classical background. Although his compositions are much more avant-garde, like strange jazz influence with crossover with these other things. Anyway, so yeah, my dad trained me on the violin, and then I had piano lessons kind of separately. But that was only up until about the age of 15 because it then became not cool, to be in the school orchestra. But I continued the piano. The piano did kind of stay because that's, I guess, not as uncool as the violin at that age for some reason.
You mentioned piano and violin. I'm curious how that developed into what you're doing now. Obviously, your sound is so unique and alternative. I'm curious of that progression from learning classically and then doing what you do now.
Well, I suppose when I think about my parents' taste, because I do think our music taste is so defined by what our parents listen to as a kind of basis. At least I observe that in others as well. But my mum and dad both had extremely diverse tastes. Obviously, my dad, classical, and I was learning that. But my mum would listen to the kind of complete opposite, like Motown and more pop stuff, and so I had this kind of really wide spectrum of music from both mum and dad. And then with my own classical training, I guess I didn't have a theory knowledge. I just kind of learned clonkety clonk, like I'm going to play some Mozart, and there wasn't that soul to it. But I then heard Alicia Keys, and I heard her first album, and that just blew me away because I'd never heard piano and vocal done in that way, because she also had a very classical element, but she kind of was bringing more jazz and, just more gospel influence in her chords. So that just struck a chord, mind the pun, struck a chord with me. And I began kind of just crafting chords in my own way based on how she was kind of doing it, and trying to experiment more with jazzy influences. So I guess the classical training helped me train my ear, because obviously, especially playing violin, you have to really train your ear, otherwise it just sounds terrible. So that, I would say, gave me the ear training, and the piano, discipline helped me kind of focus and shifting it over to learning something different. But yeah, I didn't have the same soul with classical music as I did when I heard Alicia Keys. That was a very different feeling. So I quickly gave that up, got the Alicia Keys songbook, and then I was just off. And I wasn't even singing then. It took me a while to kind of find my voice and start singing, because me and my friend would go in the music room at school on our lunch times, and she would be singing the Alicia Keys vocal and I would be playing the piano. And then she was like, "Oh, can you harmonize with this?" And I didn't really know how to do that, but I started doing it and realized, oh God, I can actually sing. So yeah, it was quite an interesting switch over.
So that's how you found your voice and started singing from being a musician.
Yeah, for sure.
Cool.
Definitely those lunch times, something kind of awakened as I was singing along with her, because she had an incredible voice. So I kind of really was just riffing off her and like, oh my God, I can sing as well. Because I was very shy. I was a very shy child, I would say, like slow to kind of feel confident in myself. But yeah, that was like, I could then release my sensitivities, while playing the piano and singing.
Amazing. So after that, did you just start practicing the piano with singing, or did you stick with her for a little bit doing her harmonies, or did you get straight into singing?
I think at the time when I reflect back, so around that time I have an older sister, and she's a writer, but she was writing poetry and all these kind of very kind of depressing teenage poems. And she asked me if I could create a song out of them. So that was my first go at songwriting. Obviously I was, singing with my friend and just singing along with her. But I guess when my sister gave me these poems, that was when I first started, playing around with top line melodies and actually just creating my own words. And then that then linked over to learning to actually record my own vocals and but yeah, it was my sister's poetry that really, I guess, ignited my own kind of take with words, and then, you know, influenced by that, then putting my own experience into words.
So a very creative family then.
Yeah, my sister, well, as I said, my sister's a writer. I mean, she played clarinet growing up. My dad's side, definitely. My nana, his mum, she was a piano teacher, and I think she composed a little bit. But yeah, my dad was like the composer. My uncle, his brother, fixes all the woodwind instruments for the Royal Opera House in London. So there's like this kind of mix over with the technical side and the playing side, the teaching side. So, and my cousins as well, they're musical. So it was kind of like just gonna happen, I guess. And my mum would just be singing 24/7. So embarrassing me. And
I'm imagining your family Christmas as just a music jamboree.
yeah, it really was. My nana would be like, "Okay, grandchildren, you need to perform for us." She didn't speak like that. She was a lot more, "All right, children, come and perform for us." So yeah, we'd have our little kind of family concert. And my sister actually said, she said when I was young, and I maybe did start singing younger, because she said that I would just be looking up at mum and then trying to copy her singing. So maybe I did have a little voice when I was a baby, but yeah.
But I guess that does bring us to the next question that I wanted to ask, which was, if you could go back in time and give your younger self some advice, what would it be?
Keep moving forward and doing what you're doing, and stop worrying like if other people are going to like it, and just really keep that vision, because I had the double side of, you know, writing more electronic music and piano, and I still do. Some people would be like, "Oh, you know, you should focus on piano music, or you should focus on singing over electronic music," and it was very confusing. So yeah, I would encourage my younger self just to really kind of shut those voices down and just go full steam ahead with all I wanted to do. You know, easier said than done with the other voices, but yeah.
Your music does change a little bit throughout your scope as I was listening to your older albums and whatnot. Do you have a favourite song that you've ever written where you're like, yeah, this is my sound, like, where you were just so content with it?
There's actually a song which didn't really get much attention, only because it was just kind of deep in my album. But there's a track on my Plutonia album called Irrelevant that I feel like encapsulated a lot of my, just how the sound palette, it kind of brought together so many different things. And whenever I hear that, I have like a really grounded sense of like, yes, this really feels like me in every sense. And not that the others don't, but there's just something always special about that song when I listen to it. I don't know if it was the time that I wrote it or how I was feeling when I wrote it, but there was just so much of me that went into that I can't necessarily put into words. But yeah, I would say, yeah, there's a track called Irrelevant that when I kind of feel sad that I didn't kind of put that out more, but then at the same time it's got a special little place. And I do sometimes get messages from people talking about that song and saying how much it kind of touched them. So that's always confirmation, I guess, that, or it's just nice to know that it has resonated with people, even though it's tucked away in the album. So we'll go with Irrelevant for that.
So when you say it was quite important to you and you put yourself into it, is there any type of event that was going on in your life or storyline behind it for you personally?
Yeah, well, I wrote that at the time I was in a really horrible relationship for a while. And I guess it was kind of the peak. I would say that was the peak of where I was deep in it. And it's almost like I was halfway through. And I always knew that it wouldn't be forever, but I knew I had to be in it to learn lessons. There was kind of this deeper knowledge that, okay, this is really unhealthy for me, but there's no way I'm leaving it now. I can't leave it now. It was, you know, but then there'd been so much that had happened. So it was this pinnacle point within my own, I guess, growth and realization, wanting to change what had happened, but also seeing that it needed to happen for me to change in the future. So it was definitely a pinnacle point, and I think that's why it holds such a special place, because when I listen to it, I can hear how much pain I was in when I was writing it. Like I really feel that, but it's almost like, I guess, that part where, not that I enjoyed the pain, but it was like I knew so much was happening for me, at that time of making it, that it kind of is like, I just want to put it in this little nest and be like, that little part of me, I see you and I hear you. So it's maybe like a protective feeling I have over that song, because it represents that kind of more vulnerable time of my life. Hopefully that makes some kind of picture of what it does for me.
No, it absolutely does. And I will ask one more question, because a song that I'm absolutely obsessed with of yours is The Talking Palm Tree. And in the lyrics, you say, mirrors everywhere reflecting your fears. But then in the chorus, you're talking about freedom. So I feel like for me, the way that resonates is being free of your certain paradigms or fears. I don't know. I wanted to know, what is your story and your personal sort of take on that song?
So when I write songs, I feel like it's all very subconscious. Like there's not a lot of, I'm not going to say there's not intentional thought, because obviously that is while I'm writing it, but it's only when I step back and I've actually had months, and I know a lot of our other artists have this, experience. It's only when you step back after maybe months of the song being written that you really feel what it was fully about. But I guess when I was writing that, at the time I was learning a lot about this archetype in astrology called Lilith, and Lilith kind of represents that part of us that is so suppressed, and it's kind of like the wild part of us that we push down because of society and structure. That could be our family, or the wider kind of net of just social structures, that we push this really wild part of us down. So I feel like with that exact line, mirrors reflecting back all our fears, when we suppress things, it will always still be reflected in other people. So if we're attracting, challenging situations or certain people that really trigger us and stuff, it is mirroring back, a suppressed part that's very kind of a Jungian philosophy, or, the way he perceived things was that we bring things into our life to show us things about ourselves. So the chorus freedom is exactly that. It's like when we are aware of that and we integrate that and we don't disown these parts of us, that's where the freedom is, because you're completely having a 360 spectrum view of yourself and your place in your life. So again, while I was writing it, I don't think I was intentionally even thinking the words just kind of come out, but definitely when I look back, that is what I was personally going through. That whole Answers EP that The Talking Palm Tree is from, a lot of the themes are exactly that, seeing myself in my own life in terms of tricky things that were happening and, all of that. So that song definitely was the pinnacle, I think, of that feeling and the realization of, oh, damn, like when I look at these things, it's actually free. It's not scary. I feel actually free being able to look at it all from a bird's eye perch.
I want to ask about your collaboration with Abbey Road Studios and the London Symphony Orchestra. How did that all come about?
Well, the way that came about was I had released an EP called 3 Earth, and on that EP was a track called Miss Kayani. And I think it was just, I had a friend on Instagram who was friends with maybe an engineer that worked at Abbey Road Studios, and I think she had shared this song. And he reached out saying, oh, I work for Abbey Road. We're really looking to collaborate with some electronic artists and put them with the London Contemporary Orchestra to make an album for TV and film. And he was like, we'd really love to have you on and, just bring something different. I think they were looking for something a bit different. And that, it was funny because that track, I never thought that would necessarily do much, but it kind of seemed to take me certain places that I'd never have imagined, like Abbey Road. So it wasn't so much, I guess, that experience changed how I made music, but it definitely opened me up to a different approach in terms of, starting to create more for a brief, for TV adverts, where they basically sent me, okay, we want some tracks in this kind of vibe. I think they sent me references such as Fortet, Bonobo, and yeah, they wanted to kind of then have these pieces created so they could fit with an orchestra, which was definitely a first for me, composing with an orchestra in mind. So I was layering strings and I guess my classical mind kind of had to kick in for that. But it was an interesting process, because I guess that was also a pinnacle of combining my past, my kind of roots in classical music, but then with the electronic that I kind of picked up along the way with production. The experience was insane. I mean, I was just, composing these tracks at home, in my joggers, just with a messy bun. And then the next thing I know, I'm kind of in this prestigious studio where the Beatles and Pink Floyd recorded, watching this orchestra play my, little bedroom compositions. But I think I had to compose quite a few. I think it was like 6 songs, and then they chose kind of their favorites from those. And the experience as well was really helpful. I think for my production mostly, because there was no vocals required, just some kind of oohs and ahs backing vocals. So it was really good for me, I think, just to focus solely on the instrumentation, learn about, what works in that setting of film and TV, having that in mind, as opposed to just me, creating and expressing, whatever emotion I was going through. It was much more detached. But it was just so trippy being in that room. I was like, definitely imposter syndrome kicked in. I was like, how am I here? It was incredible though. Like, I'm so grateful for that experience, because, not many people can say that they've had the opportunity to do that. And like I said, I still pinch myself at that, and really happy. It was just the next level seeing this orchestra play my string arrangements. I just still can't get over that feeling. So, and I've kind of kept they gave me a score with where they like put it all in notes on the paper. So yeah, crazy experience, crazy.
And another wild experience I want to ask you about, probably was a bit surreal, was when Pyramid went crazy on the Spotify viral charts and TikTok. That came about a little bit after its release, didn't it?
So from what I understand, or someone told me, it was a Korean either model or Korean pop star or some kind of influencer in Korea posted a video with the track on their video, and it just kind of went from there. I don't know how it went viral, but I guess maybe he was a bigger star and some people heard it. And I didn't even have TikTok really at the time. I think I had a page, but it wasn't active. So I just started getting texts from people being like, oh, you didn't realize your song is like everywhere on TikTok. I was like, huh? What? So yeah, that was another surreal experience, because just before that happened, I was kind of prepared to be like, okay, I've done a lot with my music career. I need to just give it a rest. Like, I'm burnt out from releasing the album, and I was ready to kind of just be like, I'm going to do art full time. And that was when it kind of happened, and it was like, yeah, the universe was saying, no, it's time for you to come back.
It's funny because I was just thinking about other interviews we've done with musicians, and it's kind of similar. Like, they're ready to give up, and then something happens, even if it's just a person they meet or experience or offer.
Yeah.
You've obviously been breaking ground in the Web3 space as well now. So how's all that going? And how did you even find Web3 in the first place?
After the track went viral, I had opportunities to sign to some majors, and it was like a real fork in the road of like, okay, I could go down this route and, I don't want to say sell my soul, but just, really get back into that frame of mind. But there was something in me that was like, I want to retain that independence, but I didn't want to go back into the way I was being independent before, in Web2 style, which is very hard. It's very, very hard as an independent artist. Like, you have to wear way too many hats than one person is like capable of. And so I was kind of at this junction point of like, okay, I've got this cool opportunity. I'll kind of dip a toe in, but not go fully in. And then I had heard of music NFTs, I think in 2021. someone I knew had kind of released some, and with my artwork, it was more so through my artwork, people would say, oh, you should release this as an NFT. And I didn't really understand what it was. I knew it was connected with crypto, but it was just this abstract term that I just didn't look further into. So it was kind of on my radar, but I didn't know much about music NFTs. And then I think I saw an interview with Latasha on NFT Now, and the way that she described her experience just resonated so much, and just how she approached her artistry and, just her kind of entrepreneurial spirit, and how that just wasn't, matching her Web2 experience. And that's very much, I guess, how I felt, because I am very self-led, and I think going into the sort of Web2 structure where if you're in a major label, they do kind of want to mold you a little bit. That always made me feel quite uncomfortable, even if it was for my own good. The rebel in me was like, no, don't tell me what to do. So I never found a structure that kind of fit that way of being, until I heard more about Web3 and how artists were releasing music there. So that would have been maybe October, November time last year. And so after that, I was just researching as much as I could, learning more about, because I didn't really know much about crypto either. I did have some Ethereum, I think, but it was just from someone saying, oh, you should get some Ethereum. But I didn't really understand terms. I didn't really know. So I spent a good few weeks kind of researching everything I could about Web3, learning about, other artists that have released NFTs, how they did things, the different phrases, the lingo. And I then had a call with Jaden Violet. I think I started following him, and he just sent a message after I followed and was like, oh, I love your music. Like, if you ever want to jump on a call about music NFTs, let me know. So I had a great chat with him, and he really kind of, explain his experience and how he approached things. And it was really mind-blowing. Like, he's got such an incredible kind of approach and mindset about how to exist in Web3. And it was so different from anything I had experienced in the Web2 style of releasing music. So had that call with him, and then I started joining more Twitter spaces, like following other artists and just kind of feeling out how it worked. And that all that year prior to discovering Web3 in this way, I'd been working on an album, finishing off an EP, because the viral moment on TikTok really, got me back into music. I was like, okay, I need to finish off all this music. So I was like, okay, I have all this music, and now I'm just discovering this new way of releasing music. So I really spent time educating myself, and I got to the point where I was like, okay, I don't really know how much more I can do. I'm in these Twitter spaces. I don't necessarily fully know where to go from here. And that's when I then discovered Emma Miller's space, who she hosts was hosting these spaces every day, every weekday. And because she was from the UK, I was like, okay, that I can relate more, because a lot of the spaces I were in were very kind of American, and nothing wrong with that. But I just didn't, it felt like they'd already kind of established their clique, and I didn't feel like I could really get in, if that makes sense. Or I didn't feel like they really were like, who's this random British girl, So I started joining Emma Miller's space, and that was when it felt like boots on the ground. I was really understanding more and more the way she explained it. She was really explaining the technicals and invited newbies like myself up to ask questions. And so that was kind of where it really felt like I could form a plan of how to start releasing music. And now I'm here. So I'm still learning a lot. The learning process still continues, because obviously it changes so much. But that was my kind of entry point, I would say. Very long-winded way of explaining that.
I love that point about Jaden, because that just goes to show how good the community is, like literally DMing you, like, let's get on a call. That's the best thing about it. Everyone's so welcoming.
Yeah, for sure.
So what have you got coming up next? Do you have anything exciting to share?
I am planning to release a song through Nifty Music. So I'm releasing a mint pass and then doing the floor drop with them. So I have a track coming out with them. And then after that, I plan to release a much more raw piano kind of yeah, just it's still in the making, but these are songs that have been locked away for a long time that have been so precious to me. But I always knew there was going to be a timing for them, and I do feel like that time is definitely coming up. So after I've done the floor drop, I plan to release maybe a small collection of these very kind of emotive, piano based, bit of electronic kind of EP collection. So that's kind of the next plans. But everything changes so much, as we know, so that could shift and alter in other ways, but those are my kind of immediate plans. But yeah, the floor drop with Nifty, that should be July, maybe August time. So
is it all the Web3 focus at the moment, or do you jump between the two?
at the minute it has been more Web3 focus, but I kind of stepped back a bit from Web2 in terms of talking about, releasing music on the blockchain, because I felt like I was still learning so much that I didn't feel in a place where I could be like, hey guys, this is what I'm doing. Because also it's, it is shouting into the void a little bit, with explaining to, the current music industry about NFTs, because it's so not a thing yet in that world. But my plan is to kind of slowly start introducing, what I have been doing in this world. And especially as well, because with the floor drop, he's introduced, or the team there have introduced the ability to pay with credit card, PayPal. So you can get your Web2 fans across if that's something they want to be involved in a much simpler way, where they don't have to learn, how to be on the blockchain or buy anything from there. So that's my plan, is to kind of talk about that and also release music there as well, and start crafting more of a Web2 kind of campaign for that's more tailored to, how I'm doing things now. But that's going to take some kind of, figuring out and a lot of content creation.
What does success look like out of interest? Like what are you running towards?
Success for me at the minute would actually be successfully managing my day, where I have great headspace for creating, great time for being on spaces, like a really balanced day of admin, creative and social, that would be success for me. Because obviously, it's quite hard to balance creative time as well as being so involved in, talking to people and, all that's required to exist here. So for me, that is the success that I am aiming for. And obviously a successful collection would be amazing for as many people to be able to straddle Web 2 and Web 3 in a really healthy, functioning way that's in flow. I'm kind of have the energy to put into both. So time management is the goal.
This episode was proudly brought to you by Massive, building the world's most connected community of artists and fans. Head to massive.fan to find out more about their new platform.